Good afternoon, keluarga Malaysia. Welcome to Updates at Noon. I'm Renee Fong. Highlight of our bulletin today: 6 new improved initiatives for civil servants. Shellings fired at Baghdad's high-security green zone. The government has announced 6 improvement initiatives for civil servants. These, among others, include special additional annual salary increment of RM100 for all officers grade 11 to 56 and will be paid by January next year. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri, when announcing the matter, said this will benefit some 1.28 million civil servants, involving a total allocation of RM1.5 billion.
Sebagai contoh, sebelum ini kadar KGT bagi grade 11 adalah RM80, maka pada tahun 2023 beliau akan menerima kadar KGT asas sebanyak RM100, menjadikan jumlah KGT diterima pada tahun 2023 adalah sebanyak RM180.
He said this at the 18th Annual Civil Servants Gathering at the Putrajaya International Convention Centre, PICC. Also present were Chief Secretary to the State, Tan Sri Muhammad Zuki Ali, Civil Service Department Director General, Datuk Sri Muhammad Shafiq Abdullah, QPAX President, Datuk Adnan Mat, as well as Cabinet Ministers. Energy and Natural Resources Minister Datuk Seri Taqiyuddin Hassan said the energy sector plays a critical role towards realising the national aspirations of reducing carbon footprint. He said this is especially true for the electrical supply industry. The goals include implementation of active mitigation by increasing the capacity of renewable energy to 31% by the year 2025. This in turn would be ramped up further to 40% by 2035, according to Malaysian Renewable Energy Roadmap MyRER.
Kemudian pelaksanaan option baru perolehan bekal elektrik hijau kepada syarikat korporat melalui kita ada satu perjanjian agreement dipanggil Virtual Power Purchase Agreement VPPA yang akan dimulakan suku keempat mulai bulan 10, 11, 11 ya, di mana dengan tawaran kuota 600 megawatt ya.
Datuk Seri Taqiyuddin said 3 islands in the country are being proposed to be green energy islands using 100% renewable energy. They are namely Pulau Redang and Pulau Perhentian in Terengganu, as well as Pulau Tioman in Pahang. Raja Permaisuri Agong Tunku Haja Azizah Aminah Maimunah Iskandariah yesterday graced the opening of the Royal Flora Putrajaya 2022. The 12th edition of the event showcased various species and cultivars of flowers and ornamental plants. The Queen, in her speech, expressed her love for ornamental and vegetable plants and said that tending to the palace garden has been part of her daily activities with the staff at Istana Negara.
Semasa COVID, yang 2 tahun saya dikunci di Istana Negara, lock up ya, macam dalam jail saya kata. Saya bersama-sama dengan semua warga Istana Negara, pekerja-pekerja, kami sempat ya berkebun, bertanam sayur di belakang istana. Banyak juga kebun masih ada, cuma mungkin sekarang ni oleh kerana kesibukan kuranglah kami semua pergi ke kebun, tetapi berhasillah dapat merasa timun, kacang botol, kacang panjang, kangkung, bayam.
Tunku Hajah Azizah spent over an hour touring the Anjong Flora Garden, viewing the sights the event had to offer. Her Majesty was also presented the Phalaenopsis orchid as a memento of the occasion by the Putrajaya Council. Meanwhile, Federal Territories Minister Datuk Seri Dr. Shahidan Kasim admitted that the organisation of the Flora Festival in Putrajaya is able to open up numerous business and service opportunities. He said the event, organised based on the spirit of Keluarga Malaysia, will bring together Malaysians from all backgrounds.
Flora di Raja Putrajaya setiap tahun dapat menyumbang kepada peningkatan potensi industri bunga-bungaan, lanskap dan pelancongan sebagai satu daripada bidang ekonomi utama negara dan seterusnya memacu perkembangan industri ini sebagai satu alternatif pelaburan yang menguntungkan negara serta rakyatnya.
He said the festival also aims at celebrating the aesthetic beauty of the floral arrangements on display. It will also promote landscaping and gardening activities as a healthy and prosperous lifestyle. Themed Great Flora, the 12th edition of the Flower and Garden Festival, is now open to visitors until 4th September. Keeping with the selection of orchids as the themed flower, the festival gathers around 10,000 orchids and 400,000 plants of various species. A prostitution syndicate involving foreign women was busted by the Malaysian Immigration Department through Ops Gegar. Its Director General, Datuk Seri Khairul Zaimi bin Daud, said 27 individuals were arrested at two premises in Selangor on 26 August. All of them were comprised of 20 Indonesian women, 3 Thai women, 2 Vietnamese women and 2 local men believed to be guards of the premise. Inspections found that all the foreign women had misused their social visit pass as they first entered the country legally as tourists. The premises they were arrested in was turned into a transit centre before they were sent off to hotels for prostitution. The syndicate is believed to have been operating for almost 2 years, with the WhatsApp social media application as their platform. Also confiscated were cash worth 9,325 ringgit. The case is being investigated under the Immigration Act 1959, Anti-Trafficking in Persons and Anti-Smuggling of Migrants Act 2007 at Ipsum. Sime Darby Property Berhad Mitsui and Co Limited and Mitsubishi Estate Co Limited is developing a multi-tenanted ready-built warehouse at Bandar Bukit Raja Industrial Gateway, Klang. Sime Darby Property Group Managing Director Dato' Azmi American said the ready-built warehouse is the third project by its joint venture company as the MIT Development Sendirian Berhad in Bandar Bukit Raja. Speaking at the groundbreaking for the warehouse site, he said construction has already begun in July and the warehouse is to be fully completed by the second quarter of 2023.
As we witness the groundbreaking of this latest offering, the ready-built warehouse here in Bandar Bukit Raja, which in fact has been fully taken up by Siva Logistics and SLM. So congratulations to both Siva and SLM as well.
The warehouse will be a 2-storey facility spanning approximately 45,000 square meters of gross floor area. It will feature flexible spatial design as well as a suite of other modern amenities to meet the needs of tenants and support the expansion plans in the future. He added that this project will contribute towards the state's vision of becoming a potential hub for domestic and international investors and at the same time create sustainable value for the rakyat and future generations.
Kejayaan negara pada hari ini adalah hasil muafakat serta usaha perjuangan kita secara berterusan bagi melihat sebuah negara bangsa yang berdaulat, sejahtera dan maju. Nilai jati diri yang tersemat kukuh di jiwa menjadi tunjang kekuatan kita bagi menjaga keselamatan dan kesejahteraan negara tercipta. Suasana keharmonian, kesetiaan dan perpaduan dalam keluarga Malaysia yang dipamerkan membuktikan betapa kita perlu mengukuhkan semangat patriotisme daripada diganggu pelbagai anasir dari dalam maupun luar. Oleh itu adalah penting untuk kita terus menyuburkan semangat cintakan negara selaras dengan prinsip-prinsip rukun negara yang telah sebati dalam jiwa sanubari. Hormatilah prinsip yang berjaya menyatu padukan kita semua sebagai sebuah keluarga untuk saling bantu-membantu dan melindungi antara satu sama lain. Demi tanah air, demi anak bangsa, ayuh keluarga Malaysia. Bersama-samalah kita menyemarakkan lagi sambutan bulan kemerdekaan dengan mengibarkan jalur gemilang di rumah, bangunan pejabat, bangunan perniagaan, bahkan di kenderaan kita. Sematkan di hati dengan semangat patriotisme untuk mempertingkatkan lagi keamanan, kemakmuran dan kesejahteraan negara tercinta demi keluarga. Selamat menyambut Hari Kebangsaan 2022. Merdeka, merdeka, merdeka.
On the foreign front, protesters call for release of Palestinian prisoners. Multiple shellings fired towards Baghdad's high-security green zone on Monday after Shiite cleric Muqtada Sadr said he was quitting politics, sparking chaos in which 15 of his supporters were killed. Tensions have soared in Iraq amid a political crisis that has left the country without a new government, prime minister or president for months, and escalated sharply after Sadr's supporters stormed the government palace following their leader's announcement. At least 7 shells fell in the high-security green zone, which houses government buildings and diplomatic missions. It was not immediately clear who was behind the shelling, which was followed by the sound of automatic weapons being fired in the green zone. The security source said SADR supporters opened fire at the green zone from the outside, adding that security forces inside were not responding. Medics said 15 SADR supporters were shot dead and 350 other protesters injured, some with bullet wounds and others suffering tear gas inhalation. Witnesses said earlier that SADR loyalists and supporters of a rival Shiite bloc, the Pro-Iran Coordination Framework, had exchanged fire. Caretaker Prime Minister Mustafa Al-Kadhimi said security or military forces or armed men were prohibited from opening fire on protesters. SADR, who once led a militia against American and Iraqi government forces and a long-time player in the country's political scene, announced on Twitter that he was stepping back from politics. Shortly after the declaration, SADR's followers burst into the Republican Palace in Baghdad, where cabinet meetings are usually held. Inside the opulent palace, protesters lounged in armchairs in a meeting room. Some waved Iraqi flags and took photographs of themselves, and others cooled off in a swimming pool in the garden. The leader of a Palestinian freedom fighter group in Gaza accused Israel on Thursday of reneging on its commitments under a truce that ended a flare-up earlier this month. The televised remarks of Ziad al-Nakala came as the group held simultaneously rallies in the Gaza Strip, Damascus and Beirut, weeks after 3 days of violence that ended in the Egyptian rocket truce. Israel said its airstrikes launched on 5th August on positions of the Iran-backed Islamic Jihad in Gaza were a preemptive operation to avert an imminent attack. In response, Islamic Jihad fired more than 1,000 rockets, but many of them either hit farmland or were intercepted by Israel's air defense system. In the Gaza Strip, according to the enclave's health ministry, 49 Palestinians were killed, 17 of them children and more than 350 wounded. After the truce truce took effect, the Islamic Jihad said it contained an Egyptian commitment to work towards the release of 2 prisoners, Basim al-Sadi, a senior figure in the group's political wing, and freedom fighter Khalil Awalde. Sadi, who was arrested on August 1st in the occupied West Bank, was charged in an Israeli military court with affiliation with the Islamic Jihad, as well as incitement and aiding contact with enemy elements. Awalde has been held without charge by Israel since December and been refusing food since March, apart from a brief period of a few days. The 40-year-old, held in custody in an Israeli hospital, is said to be in critical condition and his life in danger. Israel's Supreme Court on Sunday rejected an appeal to release him from custody on the grounds that the army had agreed to freeze his administrative detention while he remains hospitalized. Awalde has vowed to keep up the protest fast until his detention is revoked. Russia has shipped a battery of S-300 anti-aircraft missiles from Syria to a Russian port near Crimea in an apparent attempt to bolster its air defenses in the war with Ukraine. ImageSat International ISI captured pictures showing the presence of the S-300 anti-aircraft battery at Mashhad, Syria in April, and the empty sites left behind after the hardware was shipped to the port of Tartus. By 20th August, they had gone, and ISI concluded they were transferred to a Russian vessel, the Sparta II, which left Tartus for the Russian port of Novorossiysk. The Russian Defense Ministry declined to comment. Russia has maintained a military presence in Syria since 2015 when it intervened in the civil war there on the side of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. If confirmed, the transfer would indicate a significant Russian move to bolster air defenses in the war with Ukraine, where its forces have sustained damaging attacks in recent weeks. A senior military officer who became a graft buster and turned on his political patron upon seizing power, Angolan President João Lourenço, has won a second term. But the victory was not a walk in the park. The 68-year-old secured a new mandate in the tightest vote held in the oil-rich country on 24th August. Lourenço leads the People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola (MPLA) party, which has ruled the country for nearly half a century after sweeping to power in 1975. His victory was officially confirmed 24 hours after he buried his predecessor, the country's longtime ruler, José Eduardo dos Santos, who died in Spain last month due to an illness. Handpicked by dos Santos, Lourenço took over the office in 2017. That year, his party won with a comfortable 61% of the votes. This time, he swung back to office with just 51%. He had promised sweeping reforms and a crackdown on corruption. But as the results showed, support for the Soviet-educated former general has faded as the oil-rich country grapples with soaring poverty, inflation, drought, and unemployment. Lourenço promised more transparency, less corruption, and inclusive governance. However, his administration is now seen as authoritarian. The Commission gave the ex-Marxist People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola (MPLA) a 51.17% majority after all votes were counted. Its longtime opponent, the National Union for the Total Independence of Angola or UNITA, got 43.95%, its best result ever. Tens of millions of people across Pakistan were battling the worst monsoon floods in a decade, with countless homes washed away, vital farmland destroyed, and the country's main river threatening to burst its banks. Climate Change Minister Sherry Rahman said a third of the nation was underwater, creating a crisis of unimaginable proportions. Makeshift camps have sprung up all over Pakistan, in schools, on motorways, and on military bases to give shelter to the hundreds of thousands of displaced flood victims. Officials say 1,136 people have died since June when the seasonal rains began, but the final toll could be higher as hundreds of villages in the mountainous north have been cut off after flood-swollen rivers washed away roads and bridges. The annual monsoon is essential for irrigating crops and replenishing replenishing lakes and dams across the Indian subcontinent, but it can also bring destruction. This year's flooding has affected more than 33 million people, 1 in 7 Pakistanis, said the National Disaster Management Authority. Millions of acres of rich farmland have been flooded by weeks of non-stop rain. But now the Indus is threatening to burst its banks as torrents of water course downstream from the tributaries in the north. In sports, the Silver scores hat-trick for JDT to thrash Melaka United FC. Stay tuned.
Perbarisan dan Perarakan Hari Kebangsaan 2022 31 Ogos 2022 Rabu bermula pukul 7 pagi bertempat di Dataran Merdeka Kuala Lumpur. Orang ramai dijemput hadir.
Johor Darul Takzim's JDT Bergsenda Silva scored a hat-trick in the 4-0 win over Melaka United last night to take his tally to 20 goals in the Super League. With 7 matches remaining, the Brazilian striker leads the scorers chart and is the favourite to win the Golden Boot award. In action at the Sultan Ibrahim Stadium, it was clear from the start that JDT were looking to unleash their frustrations following their 5-0 defeat to Urawa Red Diamonds en route to crashing out in the round of 16 of the AFC Champions League. JDT took the lead through Fernando Forestieri in the 13th minute. The Silva then fired in 3 goals in the 33rd, 42nd and 85th minutes for his second hat-trick of the season. With this easy win, 8-time champions JDT remain atop the 12-team standings with 41 points after 15 matches, while Melaka United are 8th with 17 points also from 15 matches. Meanwhile, JDT 3 were crowned as champions of the 2022 President Cup after hammering Sri Pahang FC 2-0 in the final action yesterday at Stadium Temerloh. In the first half of the action, both teams were exchanging attacks seeking for an early lead. However, JDT 3's Syukur Faiz Januri broke the deadlock to score the first goal of the night on the 45th minute. Refused to back down, Sri Pahang FC continued to look for the equaliser in the second half. However, it was clear that the visitors were more ferocious as they exploded with the second goal by Najmuddin Kamal Akmal on the 87th minute. Armed robbers broke into the home of Barcelona striker Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang early on Monday morning and physically assaulted the player and his wife. According to reports by Spanish newspaper El País, both the player and his wife, Alicia Behagi, suffered minor injuries. Aubameyang has not confirmed any details of the robbery. It is the second time in the last 2 months at Aubameyang's home in Castelldefels, a suburb in the metropolitan area of Barcelona, has been burglared, although the player and his family were not at home during the first break-in. According to media reports, 4 hooded men broke into his home on Monday and threatened the player and his family with firearms. They struck Aubameyang and his wife and forced them to open a safe in order to steal jewellery. This is not the first time Europe's top-flight players have been victims of robberies. In December, Manchester City defender Joao Cancelo was assaulted at his home in England, and Benfica defender Nicolas Otamendi was attacked during a robbery at his home in Portugal. In Barcelona, the homes of Gerard Piqué, Ansu Fati, Jordi Alba, Samuel Umtiti and Coutinho have been robbed during games. Similar incidents have also been reported among players in Madrid, Seville and Valencia. On to tennis. Former world number 1 Andy Murray maintained his strong first-round record at the US Open when he downed 24th seed Francisco Cerundolo 7-5, 6-3 and 6-3. The Scot, who lifted the trophy in New York in 2012, fired his backhand through the court while he recovered from next phase Emilio. In women's, two-time Grand Slam champion Simona Halep has been knocked out of the US Open, suffering a shock defeat to unseeded Ukrainian Daria Sneager 6-2, 0-6 and 6-4. Sneager stuns the 2019 Wimbledon champion at Louis Armstrong Stadium in her Grand Slam debut. The Romanian was one of the favourites leading into the US Open, but her Flushing Meadows campaign has been cut short by a qualifier who currently sits at number 125 on the WTA rankings. The 20-year-old gained that momentum. Then the number 7 seed. And that's all from us this afternoon. In the top story today, 6 improved initiatives announced, including special additional annual increment of 100 ringgit. Don't forget to tune in to News at 10 coming up tonight on saluran Berita RTM. Till then, I'm Renee Fong. Have a pleasant afternoon.